Welcome to Crossing the Enterprise Chasm, a podcast about software startups and their journey moving upmarket to serving enterprise customers. I'm your host, Michael Grinich. I'm the founder of WorkOS, which is a platform that helps developers quickly ship common enterprise features like single sign-on. On this podcast, you'll hear directly from founders, product leaders, and early-stage operators who have navigated building great products for enterprise customers. In every episode, you'll find strategies, tactics, and real-world advice for ways to make your app enterprise-ready and take your business to the next level. Today, I'm joined by Ajay Kulkarni, co-founder and CEO of Timescale. Timescale was founded in 2017 and is an open-source database company that focuses on time series and event data. They have a wide range of customers that include folks you probably know, like Uber, Coinbase, and Warner Media Group. Timescale's growth started with a really strong community-led bottom-up PLG strategy. You probably know some of those words. I'm excited to talk to Ajay about this and more and talk about the valuable insights that they've had along the way as they've been growing the company. Ajay, welcome to the podcast.
Michael, thank you for having me.
All right. So Timescale is open source. What does that mean? Bring us back to the beginning of Timescale as the project got started, the company started forming. Where did it come from?
The Timescale story is the classic, like, solving your own problem story. We actually started off as an IoT company, building a slightly different product. Built the first version just because we needed it, because the database we needed didn't exist in the world. And then when we found that other people were asking us more questions about this database, we became, centered on the database. And we initially just open sourced it, Apache 2, because we said to ourselves, hey, we would not use a database that wasn't open source or freely available. And that's how the journey started. And I'll be honest, this is probably 7 years ago. We were pretty new to this world of open source and Postgres. And I think now we've gotten much better, much smarter about it. But in the beginning, it was one of those, like, yeah, of course, decisions, because that's what we would have wanted as customers.
Scratch your own itch. Yeah. Can you talk about the community that formed around that? Kind of as you started building this, what was the role of others in it? Because I know there's a lot of open source projects or maybe even just companies that start with people scratching their own itch. It's a very common entrepreneurial desire. But the idea of open sourcing it and kind of building a wider community around what you're trying to achieve is a bit different. So walk me through that.
Yeah, in general, I feel like community has become a key part in many types of businesses, not just like open source. When we built Timescale, we embrace this idea of a community, and from the very beginning, we didn't just make our software open source, but we also provided free support in Slack, very active Slack channel from day one, and we didn't gate anything. And we did this because we're like, hey, number one, like, it's just more fun to serve a larger audience. Like, as an engineer, and I'm a former engineer myself, like, you want to build stuff that people use, and the more people use it, the better. So we did everything we could to kind of nurture the community, and as we have over years, and that includes free Slack support, includes free T-shirts and stickers, and it's kind of silly things that people seem to like care about. But in the beginning, what really struck me about the community is that we built on Postgres, and so this, you talk about crossing the chasm. Um, 1 month after we launched, there was a utility in Italy that replaced Redis with Timescale to monitor 47 of their plants, and they did this on their own, and then they told us about it, and our reaction was, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because we're not sure you should do this." And they did it, and they trusted us, and it worked. Like, really, because we were built on Postgres. Another of our early users that year, our first year, was Bloomberg, and we made it into like the Bloomberg terminal. And so our community from the beginning was both these like startup innovating folks who were building new companies in IoT or crypto, but also some traditional folks in energy and manufacturing and finance. And I think it's led to a really rich community. And I think it's testament to the work that the team has done, but also testament to the popularity of Postgres.
I feel like that's a new definition of product market fit, or it's one that I've heard from a lot of other founders and entrepreneurs. People start adopting your software, start using it, despite it maybe not being ready to go, not having all the capabilities or features. Can you talk more about that? Like, as Timescale was evolving and you were building out new things into it, what was missing? Like, what did you learn along the way? What did you hear back from people that were trying to use the product?
So product market fit is such an interesting feeling. My previous company was a a BlackBerry address book. So you can imagine how long ago this was. And we were the leading address book on BlackBerry devices, and that's like being the tallest person in a sinking ship. Like you're still going down with the ship. And I don't think I think we got had some product market fit, but then it always felt like we were kind of pushing a boulder uphill. And that company got essentially acquired by GroupMe, a group messaging company that then got acquired by Skype, which then got acquired by Microsoft. And when I joined GroupMe, like GroupMe had real product market fit. And what I realized what is that like our company felt like we were pushing a boulder uphill, but with GroupMe, it was the boulder was already like rolling downhill, and you were just running as fast as you could to keep up with it. And that's how things felt with Timescale. Like Timescale in the first 3 weeks, we had more buzz and press and visibility on it than we did in 2 years of our IoT company. So we were like, okay, we don't know if this is like, $1 billion company, but like it's better than our last company, that's for sure. And so I think what product market fit feels like is you're like, hey, like there's more interest here than I can deal with, and this feedback comes in many different ways. And the thing we always focused on was, okay, like how do we make our community that back then we know customers, how do we just make them happier? And so I remember there was a feature that I think Bloomberg wanted for a what do you call it, a geotemporal use case, so like kind of tracking something over space and time. And one of our engineers was like, hey, like I know you want me to work on this one thing that's in our kind of on the whatever the backlog, but like Bloomberg needs this thing, and we need to make folks like Bloomberg successful, so I built this thing instead. And I'm like, that's great. That's actually great. And so I think like we heard a lot of things from the beginning, and some of them were like, hey, like this isn't quite working right, can you just optimize it for me? And other things were like, hey, I actually need a better, like something totally different. uh and so I think product market fit is a constant of evolution. And I think like part of it is people want a faster car. People want a faster horse, right? And part of it is people are expressing the pain points that illustrate that they need a car, but they may not be able to articulate it that way. And so I think there's this constant process of learning and maybe interpolating and extrapolating to build the thing that really solves their problems.
Yeah. 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 They want a faster horse. They want a car. They want a faster car, I guess, after that. um, talk about, so that example with Bloomberg, when they came and said, hey, we actually need you to do this other thing. It would be really great if you went this other direction. This is a common thing that happens as companies get pulled up market. You have some big customer that comes to you and wants to use your stuff, and they sort of dangle the allure of a huge contract in front of you, a big juicy, maybe multi-year, hundreds of thousands of dollars, biggest deal you've ever signed, feels like it could change the entire trajectory of your company. But in exchange for that, they want you to build something. They want you to change your roadmap, change your product in a way for their specific need. When else has this come up, for Timescale? You guys have grown a lot and expanded a lot at market. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I'm curious if you can talk about the balancing of those needs from the big customers, when to focus and spend time on it versus when to say no, where you're like, actually, we're not going to do that thing that you're saying you're going to pay us for because it's not maybe aligned with our longer term vision or roadmap. That tension, how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, our general perspective is we generally say no. And this is partially because we're actually backed by great investors like NEA and Benchmark and Redpoint, who have seen this movie so many times with like Mongo and Snowflake and Databricks, that they're like, hey, like this is a common way people fail. That like, hey, one customer hijacks your roadmap, and all of a sudden they're 30% of your revenue, and you're kind of beholden to their whims. And from the very beginning, we would say no to those things if we felt like they were kind of bespoke things that only this customer needed. But if it was something that we thought in general people would need, or if we thought, or if we saw it was something on our roadmap, we might just bring it a quarter earlier. We've done that. There's some cases where it's like, hey, they need this thing, and it's going to take a few days of engineering work. Okay, cool, and then just do it. But big things, we've really shied away from that. We've also shied away from having one big customer driving a significant part of our revenue. I think one of the advantages of PLG is you build this really wide, diverse base, which has a lot of benefits to it. But one of it is that we never felt that we were even beholden to one customer. to do this. I think there's some industries where maybe the universe of customers you would serve is like really small, like 10, and in that case you can't avoid it. But I think as a database company, building the next great database company, our customers, today are in the thousands, but our potential market is in the hundreds of thousands. So that's, the key is to build something that works for the market.
As you started getting pulled up market, Bloomberg's a great example, and you had more and more and more customers since then. What else changed? How else did you need to adapt the product, adapt the company to those needs? If you kind of think back in time to that transition as you started evolving, what changed?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say that we are just now evolving past PLG.
And where are you at right now to give people a sense of like kind of where the business is maturity wise?
Yeah, we're raised 180 million in funding. We multiple years of runway, 125 people, uh, thousands of customers, uh, and we've gotten here just through PLG, which I think is like, it's kind of, I always tell the team that like it's a testament to the quality of the product, but also to the size and the intensity of the problem we're solving, that it's pulling this out. So I would say we're just now kind of expanding past PLG, but we've had enterprising using our software from like essentially day one, and we've had enterprise customers. You know, I think our first one we've had 5 years ago. So we've had enterprise customers for a long time as well. Um, and so I think it's yeah, I think like a part of the evolution is, first, I think it's really hard to go the other way. And this is what I've heard from other folks who've been trying to do this. It's really hard to go enterprise led to PLG, but going the way we're going, I think this is the future of how I think databases are being sold. It's PLG plus sales on top.
What does that look like to you? Let's go into that maybe a little bit deeper. Yeah. What does that mean? PLG means so many different things, so many different companies, different things, different teams, different. You guys are different, than Dropbox or Airtable for sure. Very different product, different customer.
I 100% agree, and maybe the way to think about it is like, where does demand come from? Is it inbound, and does growth come from like kind of increased product usage, or does demand come from sales driving outbound and driving really large deals, and expansion comes from them working those expansions? And like your classic database companies, most of them are top down, trying to sell really large installations. Uh, for us, it's been we've we do. I think we're maybe now starting to do some outbound. We've never done any outbound, and we didn't really ever have a sales team. And so the way people discovered Timescale was through our community and our content and word of mouth and the quality of our product. They could get up and running and be successful, swipe a credit card, get into production, and we've had customers spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year with us who've never talked to us. And from one perspective, you're like, oh, that's great, it's so efficient. I think what's important lesson for me to learn as a kind of product based founder, and maybe for product based founder, engineering based founders in general, is that there's some limitations to that. And at some point, you really want a human in the loop, because number one, some customers want to be sold to. They want to have a human, they're not comfortable swiping a credit card, just getting up and going. But also number two, as you start becoming a larger and larger item on their P&L, as you become a more critical part of their infrastructure, they want to know that they can count on you, and they want to know who they can go to if they have problems. And I think there's a key human relationship there. So what PLG looked like for us is we were able to grow it essentially through inbound and just through product led revenue expansion. But I think the business of the future, at least in the database industry, is this layer cake of like PLG, and on top, for lack of a better phrase, call it SLG, essentially sales coming in and expanding deals or landing bigger deals that don't need to swipe a credit card.
Let's talk more about that. I think that's a perfect topic to dig into. So, I bet a lot of developers listening to this, people in the engineering world, are like, "Oh yeah, I totally know, developer led kind of bottom up. I've used Heroku. I signed up for Twilio. I know Stripe. I use Vercel. I knew all of these products that are kind of in the zeitgeist, right, of the tools that people use." And a lot of developers think exclusively about building their business in that way. I don't want to, there's no contact sales. I don't want to have to talk to these people. The optimal product is a credit card and an API, credit card form and an API, Um, and a lot of folks that I talk to are really hold on to that for a long period of time. Don't want to necessarily have sales engage, or when they do, it's like a technical support, type of a thing for people. You guys have been transitioning away, not away from this. I mean, it's still going, it's still driving it, but you do have a sales team. You do have like sales leadership. You have experimented with this and evolved it. Go into that. Like, how did you think about the first steps of evolving this? What did it look like? What are the things you tried and put in place? What are the mistakes maybe you made along the way? Where are you today?
Yeah, so I mean, so number one, I just hired our CRO, I think 2 months ago. So I think like on the sales side, it's all very new. Yeah, it's all very new, which is exciting. Um, Number two, we are generally not very black and white about these types of things. We're not very religious about these. I'm not someone who's like, hey, like sales is terrible or PLG is terrible or whatever. I think it depends. It always depends. I think even the database business depends. I think in any industry it depends. Um, uh, what we have found is that if you listen to the customer, then the answer kind of presents itself. So for us, it was with PLG, we saw it work really well, and we found the developers really liked it because most developers want to start off just like tinkering, and they're like they want to play with it, get a sense of what the product is, and then reach out for like help. And we'll get that a lot. But like, hey, like we ran a POC, it went really successful, but I need some help setting up this one advanced feature. Like, okay, cool, great. Um, but if you listen to customers, you realize that not every customer is like that, and there's some people who want to be sold to, and especially if you want to become a critical line item, and which I think databases eventually become, you need that human relationship. And so my feedback to entrepreneurs, especially ones who come from a product engineering background, is number one, try not to be super religious about this topic. I think be open minded and really just listen to the customer, listen to the market. Every business is different. Even the database industry, I know other database companies that are very successful at taking a very different model. So I wouldn't even say that our model is the only model that works in the database industry. Um, but I think listen to your customer, and I think for us it's been a very natural evolution of layering sales on top of PLG. But what we're doing is different than what Slack did or Airtable did, or I forget who else you mentioned did. I think it's very organic to our business, and I think there's some cautionary tales out there too. Like I think like if you look at some of the early PLG darlings like Dropbox, I think, and I haven't talked to Drew about this, but I think that you could argue that like Dropbox kind of capped out at a $10 billion market cap, um, partially because they didn't build this sales muscle early enough. And I'm sure there are other reasons as well. And so I think it's like, I think with any business, the more diverse your sources of revenue are, the better. Because at some point you might be in a VC pullback where PLG drops because there are fewer startups getting funded, but large companies are still spending money. Or you might be in a market collapse where large companies are pulling back, but there are all these new startups who are like innovating. And so I think the more diverse your customer base is, the better. The more diverse your business model is, the better. There's no one size fits all. But the one thing I've learned is listen to the customer, listen to the market, and have an open mind.
What was changing about Timescale? Like hiring CRO, big move. What was it? Opportunities that you weren't able to close? Was it conversations, different types of conversations or strategy? I mean, as you were thinking about that step beyond PLG, because you guys have, like you said, customers spending six figures on a credit card, PLG happy customers. When you started saying, "Hey, there's another level here. Maybe we should reach for a leader to bring in to kind of change our organization and evolve it," what did you see as that gap?
I could see all the money we were leaving on the table.
That's pretty clear.
I could see that there were companies coming in with kind of a sales like motion, like contact us, and we didn't have the expertise in house to like guide them through a sales process. I could see companies who were spending six figures with us that we actually didn't have a champion there. We actually, I mean, like there's someone who picked this, but like we didn't have anyone who was building a close relationship to make sure that A, the customer was happy, but B, like if there were an expansion opportunity that we could, drive it. And then number three, we started seeing enterprises, like multiple teams at multiple enterprises using Timescale through PLG. And I looked at these accounts and I'm like, these accounts should be at least 10x bigger. These should be like, all these accounts should be 7-figure accounts if you just tried. So it's kind of funny because when I talk to people who come from sales, it's like, yeah, duh, like there's a reason why sales exists and is, as a profession. And sales is evolving, but I think the fundamentals are still true. But I think for a product-based founder, it was eye-opening to say, hey, like, if you really want to capture on the opportunity that you're building, and if you really want to, I don't know, serve the people who could be served, who could benefit from your product, I think you have to layer sales on top. It depends, depending on your business. I know folks like, other folks who brought in very early and some folks who brought in later than we did. But for us, the breaking points were, hey, we have a funnel that's not a PLG funnel that we don't have the muscle to close. And then we have customers who we should be spending more time with from a sales like perspective, but we're not, because we just answer the support tickets. And if they don't send any support tickets, we don't talk to them. Again, like it's kind of like when I talk to salespeople, it's a little embarrassing because people are like, "Yeah, duh, you didn't know this." I'm like, "I didn't know this," but it's also like one of those things you're like, "Oh, okay, that means that there's like a lot of just raw potential here in this business, and that we've gotten this far despite not having a fully built out go-to-market model. Okay, let's add that on top." And I think that's the way to go. I mean, I think like be product led, and then capture more of the market you're creating through sales. I think the other way of being sales led, it's a lot harder unless you're in, I think, certain industries.
In terms of hiring a CRO, what did you look for there? Like when you were going out to market, looking for folks to come in and really be a partner with you to lead this part of the business. What was important to you when you were looking at candidates? How did you interview them? I know you just hired this person, so it's probably fresh in your mind. Walk us through that. I think there's probably a lot of people listening to this who maybe are not doing a CRO, but it's their first VP of sales, or maybe it's their first sales rep, like literally the first person coming in to actually be a seller.
I have made some good hires in my career and some bad hires, as you can imagine. And one of the places where I've made some bad hires is, you say, "Oh, open source database company. There are people who have done X, Y, and Z in open source for a decade. The people who've sold, open source databases for a decade. Let's bring them in and they'll help us figure out what to do. They'll tell us what to do." And what I realized is that in a fast moving industry, having experience can actually be a liability, because instead of looking at things with like an open mind and fresh perspective, you're coming in with this old model of like, oh, there's only one way to sell a database. But hey, the market has changed with cloud. It's more like SaaS, it's more like PLG. So the number one thing I looked for when I hired Todd, our CRO, who is so far, he's just been great, is I wanted someone who had done it before and had a track record of excellence, but who like was like intelligent and had the mental agility to say, hey, like, I've done it before. I know what great looks like. And he took his last company to north of 100 million in revenue. And, he came to Timescale he's like, I want to do it again, but faster. And what I liked with him is he's like, here's what worked before. I'm not saying that's what we should do here, but here's the questions I would ask to figure out if we should do A or B here. And so that's what I look for, is this track record of success. Look, there's some things in sales where I don't want to reinvent the wheel. There are certain proven methods to do discovery, or there's medic and all these other things that there's a reason why they work. But there's also places where, hey, like the PLG business we've built in databases, there aren't many other companies. I can maybe think of a couple that have done what we've done, and most have done the opposite. And so there's a lot of like, okay, like you have to unlearn what you've learned. And so again, what I looked for is someone who had a proven track record of excellence, could hire a great team, but also had the intelligence and mental agility to look at a fast moving market and say, okay, cool, like here's what we're going to do the same, but here's what we're going to do differently because the market's different.
We're just about out of time. Thanks for spending so much of your busy day with us. Last question I wanted to ask you, to leave our audience with: if you could go back again and give yourself advice in the earlier days, or maybe give advice to the next generation of builders and entrepreneurs, that have started building. They have this maybe community piece. They have some traction, some momentum, and now they're thinking about really growing their business. What would you say? What do you think would be some salient advice to give that group?
I would give two pieces of advice. Number one is you're always going to make a lot of mistakes, and the key is to get the right things right. And so don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake. You're going to make mistakes. It's fine. That's natural. Uh, I think the number one thing I tell myself is hire great people. And it seems like a obvious statement, but I think when you're a new founder, CEO, what's hard is, A, you don't know what great looks like. And every step along the way, I'm like, oh, I thought that person was great, but this person's way better. So it'd be part is like try to understand what great looks like. But part two is like when you're small, you have to be creative to hire great people. And what as Timescale has gotten better, I think we've gotten better at hiring, and I think our caliber and our bar has gone up. And I think it's what it's really done is it's freed me and my co-founder to focus on what we're best at and what our superpowers are. Uh, and so I think that's that'd be the number one lesson. And if there's a great book called The Who Book on Hiring that I'd recommend everyone hire.
It's funny. I have it on my desk, literally right here,
Hey,
right
there
now.
you go.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic book.
We did not plan that. That's amazing.
Yeah. Thinking about the same things, obviously. Yeah.
They're one of those things that they sound cliche, but they're so true that it's all about people. You hire great people, take your time and hire great people, and it'll unlock so much opportunity for you.
Ajay, thanks again so much for spending time with us today. We'll let you get back to it. Take care.
Hey, thank you for having me.
You just listened to Crossing the Enterprise Chasm, a podcast about software startups and their journey moving upmarket to serving enterprise customers. Want to learn more about becoming enterprise ready? The WorkOS blog is full of tons of articles and guides outlining best practices for adding features like single sign-on, skim provisioning, and more to your app. Also, make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you're first to hear about new episodes with more founders and product leads of fast-growing startups. I'm Michael Grinich, founder of WorkOS. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.